Hey, okay.
Frank, I was just saying thank you to Frank and Chris for running the meeting and keeping things going for the county last week or last meeting.
Yeah, no, hope you were somewhere having fun, not working.
Well, working, but having fun. So a little bit of both. But, great. Well, super. Well, the gang's all here, and it looks like it's 1 o'clock. Carolyn, are you ready to go?
Yes, we're ready.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Well, it's 1 o'clock, and so I'm calling the June 7th, 2021 meeting of the Albemarle County Architectural Review Board to order. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Ordinance 20-A16 and ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID disaster. The quorum is present. Architectural Review Board members present electronically are Fred Missel, Frank Hancock, Chris Henningsen, Frank Stoner, and myself, Dave Vanderwerf. Opportunities for the public to access this meeting are posted on the county's website at the county calendar. The public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone. Both is provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the county's website. The online meeting is a public record and subject to disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act. All speakers, when it's your turn to speak, please first state your name for the record. For everyone participating today, it's good practice to mute your microphone until it's your turn to speak. For applicants making presentations, note that your presentation is limited to a total of 15 minutes, which you can divide among your team members. And Carolyn will let us know when the 15 minutes are up. We'll move to disclosures. Do any members have anything to disclose today?
No, sir.
Hearing
Nope.
No.
no, nor do I. Great. Carolyn, are there any members of the public wishing to comment on items not on the agenda?
Not at this time.
Thank you. We have no items on the consent agenda, so we'll move to regular review. There is one item on the agenda for that today. Chris Taggart will present that. Chris, would you present Umansky Subaru ARB 2021-49?
Sure. Okay. 1 second. The application I'm presenting on today is the preliminary review of the renovation plan submitted for Umansky Subaru building. The site is located along Route 29 at the intersection with Hilton Heights Road. ARB has approved a number of applications for the site, including 2 special use permits in 2003 for outdoor display of vehicles and structured parking, ARB applications in 2003 and 2005 for the original design of the Phase 1 and Phase 2 buildings, and 2013 for the renovation of the Phase 2 building. A condition of one of the special use permits is that the design of the Phase 2 building shall be compatible with the Phase 1 building as determined by the ARB. To orient you within the site, the Phase 1 building is a larger building with a structured parking on the right side of the site, and the smaller building on the left is the Phase 2 building for Subaru. The existing Subaru building and the Phase 1 building achieve a level of compatibility to the historic architecture through the use of brick as the primary building material. The renovation to the Subaru building would add a slate icon tower and canopy structure to the east elevation, remove the existing slate entrance element on the south elevation, and add a new slate icon tower a short distance to the west, cover substantial portions of the existing brick and EVAs with ACM panels, and paint the red brick and EVAs that are to remain gray. The Phase 1 and Phase 2 buildings are visually connected through the use of entrance elements and the use of red brick and EVAs as building materials. The forms introduced in the renovation design help break up the length of the entrance forward-facing elevation. However, the size, position, and general character of the pickup canopy results in a monumental element. The painting of the red brick, substantial use of ACM panels, and the slate icon towers are design elements that both emphasize the trademark nature of the design and eliminates the compatibility of the Subaru building with the Phase 1 building. As mentioned earlier, compatibility of the Phase 1 and 2 buildings is one of the special use permit conditions for the site. Staff does not believe that the current design of the Subaru building is compatible with the Phase 1 building. Some options to increase the compatibility of the building design include, but are not limited to, reducing the scale of the pickup canopy structure, reducing the amount of ACM panels used in the design, maintaining the red brick, or using earth tone colors. Staff offers the following recommendations on the proposal for the next submittal. I may have a try to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. Let's see, we'll see if members have questions for you. We want to start with Frank Hancock.
No, I don't have any questions. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Frank Stoner.
Do you know why the special use permit required the two buildings to be compatible when they were last approved?
Checking on that one.
The ARB at the time wanted to ensure that there was going to be compatibility, but the applicant wasn't prepared to, there wasn't a design for the phase 2 building at the time, and they wanted to move forward with the construction of phase 1.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you, Fred. Any questions?
No, thanks, Dave.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
No questions for me. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Chris, I guess one question. So I guess the original special use permit said phase 2 had to match 1. Is there any precedent for you to put the horse before the cart and say that, subject to phase 1 eventually matching phase 2?
I can't think of any time that we've done that in the past, and it's hard to enforce.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good point, Margaret. Okay. Well, thank you. All right. Well, I'd like to invite the applicant to make their presentation at this time.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Bob Pinio. Evan Phillips is here with me as well. This is a preliminary discussion, so we got a lot to cover. Hope to meet some or identify some of the criteria that we're working under. Ideally, what I'm trying to do is we always try to do, this is a subjective idea, but we're trying to make better buildings. And by making better buildings, sometimes a little bit more flexibility helps us to make better buildings. In this particular case, we're right to the root of the matter, which is this idea of compatibility. And this is a 20-year-old or so idea that was based on this compatibility issue. We're also, from our perspective, we're also working with Subaru Corporate, that they have a specific, brand. These are all themes that we've covered in the past with Aldi, for example, and Buffalo Wild Wings and things like that. We're trying to identify a brand. We're also trying to find a place for it. We're trying to be as best as we can to identify good building components based on, design and also your guidelines. So in this particular case, the design problem that we've been faced with is this idea of compatibility of basically one out parcel building, and then a larger building that's really bifurcated into 2 uses. And that's what's going to happen moving forward. Is it's Subaru, and there's the Honda dealership, and then there's the Chrysler dealership. And each one of those identities is trying to evolve over time. So the problem with this, I think that what we're looking for is some latitude with this idea of compatibility, understanding that each 3 of these businesses is evolving over time, and their aesthetics is evolving. What they're trying to do is evolving, their brand is evolving, the way that they operate is evolving. So this kind of idea of making it all the same over time is kind of exacerbating the issue of good design, we think, because it's hard. That's another element. So for instance, Subaru is the #1 candidate here. It's an out parcel building. So we're trying to find a rational way forward, given Subaru's architecture base and what they're trying to do. Now we're trying to make that compatible, or at least relational to the other building. Now, in the meantime, Honda and Chrysler are both in the middle of redesign for their facade and improvements on the interior. Will be before you hopefully in the next X amount of months, and Honda has already moved forward with a preliminary idea on what the facade might look like, and Chrysler is in that process as well. So fundamentally, what we're asking to talk about is this idea of compatibility and where that makes sense. Can we get more latitude to make, and specifically the Subaru dealership? It becomes a design problem for Subaru. Like, is this a good building? Is it not? What's the form? What's the fit out? That's an intriguing problem in itself. But then the overlay of, well, now make it compatible with this older building that's going to change as well. So basically, that's a hard problem to solve and make good buildings, we think. So what we're asking for is a general discussion, potentially. Maybe you can help us figure out that path forward. We think, based on the corridor itself and facade lengths, that there's nothing wrong with an out parcel building that has its own character. And even the Honda and Chrysler building, the length of that building, somewhere in the 340 feet or so, that's a big building. And the capacity to split it up and to have two different facades, what is this element of compatibility, and is it bringing us better outcomes? So just to be kind of outrageous about it, Aldi was a building facade that was part of a larger structure. So, fundamentally or conceptually, you wouldn't say, well, Aldi has to be what everything else has to be on that strip mall. There's a distinction between a brand and a building. And this has more to do with the Honda and Chrysler side, but also even more acutely with Subaru, it is an outbuilding. So is compatibility, what is it? How do we define it? What are your objectives? And is it creating a better design in the end? That's what we're trying to understand. What you see before you is basically as far as the Subaru goes, is the concept of Subaru corporate. We work with them. There are a lot of site issues that modify the overall design. These are elements that they use to brand their business, and they have certain differentiators in regards to service, and that service is evolving in the last 20 years. So the whole thing is kind of changing. This is a forum that responds to that change. So that's embedded in what's in front of you. So I'm hoping to talk about generalities of the whole site itself and this compatibility issue, and then focus in on some of the more specific issues brought up in the staff report.
Great, thank you very much, Bob. Are there any other things you'd like to present before we sort of enter into questions with the board members?
What's that? Yeah, we have at some point, I'd like to see how the discussion goes. We have some additional exhibits, images, renderings of different sides of the building. But can I have that opportunity as the discussion evolves, or do you want me to present it now?
Great. Well, and it sounds like in some ways you'd like the format to be a bit of a work session, and I think we could switch to that. I don't know, Margaret, is there any problem if we approach it that way? It sounds like a good way to approach it. So happy to dive in. Let's see, do you want me I can go around same order, invite members to start the discussion. So I guess, Fred, would you start off?
I always hate going first. Well, first of all, Bob, I got to say that this presentation you put together was really excellent. I thought it really helped kind of set the context and understand the site, the proximities, the aerial views. I mean, it was really, really well done. And my humble opinion is this is a good example for other applicants to take a look at when they're preparing these kinds of documents. So thank you for that. I'm a little bit off balance just because I haven't fully thought through this, but I give you some just general thoughts first, and then since it's a work session, hopefully enjoy the ability to come back for other conversation. I know this is crazy sounding probably, but I'll be honest, these two phases to me have always felt almost separate and distinct. And I know that they're somewhat tied together, and I know there are some similarities, but as you're experiencing them on the entrance corridor, they feel to me to be more independent buildings as opposed to one united phase one and phase two. Part of that may be because of where the entrances are located. One's more facing, 29, the entrance corridor. One's really facing the Walmart parking lot. And the other, there's a dedicated entrance that takes you right into the Honda dealer and not to the other one. So there are a lot of different contributing pieces that to me just make me feel sort of subjectively like these are two separate buildings. So when I saw the staff report, and I appreciate the reminder that they needed to be compatible, going back to the wording, I think that's the right term, right? That it needed to be compatible, not that it needed to match or that it needed to, fill in the blank, but compatibility was the key focus. So for me, compatibility could be different materials. It doesn't have to be the same. I think size and scale and, all of those are important things that relate to compatibility. And I'm rambling here, but, generally speaking, I'd like to hear what everyone else says in terms of the actual building itself. But, having looked at some of the work that was done on Pantops and some other areas, there are some similarities to bringing this kind of dealership into kind of more current thinking from a design standpoint, a little fresher and cleaner. So I also, just one other thing on the landscape piece, I did look at the landscape plan that you all submitted. This is the one from Water Street.
Yes.
Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see, it wasn't as clear in those documents as figure one in the staff report was. And so I'm not sure if those are the same. I'm not asking that well. Is the figure one in the current staff report the current thinking in terms of the landscape, or is the Water Street the actual current thinking?
So I think I can answer that. So I just got off the phone with Alan Franklin. He was going to try to make it here. By and large, we're leaving the existing plant material as is. So there was this overlay, the original design, and basically we are obviously changing some things when the building mass gets bigger, and but basically we're trying to replace in kind. We're not doing much more than what was there, and when we change something, we put it back in as close as we can.
Okay, because the one thing there, and part of the reason I'm asking is that I think it's slide number 19 or page number 19 of your submittal showed it much more open in front of the dealership. And that just may be that, as you said, you're reconfiguring some things and replanting, but was the intent to open up the view shed to the building more so?
No.
Okay.
No, I have a feeling that was, I don't know exactly why that would be that way, but we weren't touching, especially in that area. We weren't.
Got it.
Yeah.
I can maybe just add a little clarity, hopefully, to that topic while we're on it. The existing condition on site now isn't exactly matching the approved plan. So there appear to be at least a few pieces missing, and that's contributing to the open appearance on the Hilton Heights Road side. And the landscape plan in the current submittal doesn't really clearly show that everything that's existing is to remain or everything that was previously approved is to remain. So there are some recommendations in the report to get that coordinated.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you, Margaret. That's all I had for now, Dave.
Great. Thank you for starting the discussion, Fred. Frank Stoner.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Great presentation. I do have one question related to the other building. If the special use permit applied to this second phase or whatever we're calling it, is there any requirement on the first that the first phase be compatible with the second phase? Or could you go essentially redevelop phase one without regard to what's in phase two? Or what's in the Subaru building?
That's a great question. And I would love to get somebody from zoning to answer that for you, and we can have that answer for you next time.
Well, Bob, I think you raised some interesting questions about what it means to be compatible, and the Lidl example is a good one, or the Aldi example. The other one that comes to mind is the Rio Hill Shopping Center, that kind of redo. And I think in a retail context, this idea that, you know, we need to use the same brick or the same materials, I have a problem with, only because I think it increases mass. And I think a lot of what we really want to do is try to break down, particularly these larger masses, into things that feel like they have their own independent identity, particularly for retail. So if in fact phase one has no obligation to be compatible with phase two, to me, that whole discussion's not really worthy of a lot of debate in the context of this building, because if you put red brick on this building, there was nothing to stop the second building from doing essentially what you're doing to this building, and then they're not going to be compatible by some measure. So
Right.
I don't have an issue personally. I don't think I have an issue with what you guys are trying to do. To Fred's point, it's happening. It happened with Ford. It happened with Mazda. It happened with, everybody in the auto business is trying to modernize. And I think the architecture of what you've shown us is clean, it's modern, it's effective in achieving some measure of branding. And I know that's important. And it, I guess, doesn't bother me in the context of this. So those are my thoughts.
Great. Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Frank. Frank Hancock.
Thanks, Bob. I agree with Fred and Frank. Great, it's a great package. I feel like too, and architecturally, you're doing all the things that the guidelines ask for or stipulate. And I think like there's so many successful moves in this design that, maybe we should be focused on that. But thinking about just the improvements to the east elevation and really that front corridor frontage is, I think, a vast improvement over what's there now. Kind of how you enter into the building, that southern elevation or that corner, I think is a big improvement. So I just kept looking at the kind of before elevations. It was almost like you'd come to the ARB with something very basic and we'd work through it and we'd kind of evolved it. And that's what where it had evolved.
Cut out those steps.
Exactly. But so anyway, I appreciate it. I think it's some really nice, architectural interventions. And as far as the initial site plan, I think that I have no issue with that. I think the original site plan and the figure one landscape plan that Fred mentioned it's a great plan. It's super dense. I mean, if you look at all the plantings integrated into a car dealership, it's very successful from that standpoint. And those are a lot of times the things we're up against is the display feature or the display idea. versus the frontage landscape requirements. And I feel like that's achieved here. So, and then on to the compatibility piece, you know, ultimately, I think it's up to us, you know, and having this information that phase 1 is under development, I think kind of helps us make this decision. Yeah, I think back to Fred's original comment of, you know, phase 1, phase 2 is a little confusing, that they're definitely separate buildings, and pretty distinct. You know, if they didn't share an ownership, I don't know, you think about it differently. You think contextually and say, what are your neighbors doing? How does this fit in with other buildings along the corridor? But you wouldn't call for it to be, you know, the exact same materials or the exact same elements. So I don't know if that's helpful, but kind of that's where I stand.
Great, thank you, Frank. Chris, what would you add?
Thanks, Chris.
I guess I had really been struggling with this one because I personally think it's really handsome, and actually I agree with everything that's been said up until now. However, I guess the struggle I was having was that I can't disagree with the staff report's assessment that it's highly branded. So that's kind of where the struggle was. I'll say that there was no individual part of the proposal that was problematic, in my opinion. I think it was very well put together. So it's really just the branding thing, and kind of what I'm hearing from my colleagues is that that's kind of not as much of an issue as I thought it was going to be. So I'm supportive of what I saw. I just had that concern, which it sounds like if the consensus is that that's not as big a deal, I'm definitely willing to go with the flow on that.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Bob, I agree with everybody who said it's a strong presentation. I think you all consistently set the mark for really clear descriptions of the projects that are very helpful in understanding them. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I think, you know, I agree with what Fred and others have said, that, you know, the buildings seem quite distinct and the complex is quite large, and, you know, anticipating future phase 1 returning, you know, personally, I think that facade could stand to be broken down a bit in scale and you know, creating more diversity. So that seems good. I think from my perspective, the building as you've designed it in terms of massing and scale is perfectly compatible and is successful, and really works well. I think appreciate Chris's comments about branding. Certainly the branding is prominent. I think if I'm concerned about branding, it's more perhaps in the color scheme, and not that white can't be compatible with brick, but that it is a bit stark. And I appreciated y'all including, you know, the many precedents of Malloy and Flow and both the Mazda and the VW. And I guess I would offer, I do think that there are some real subtlety and nuance in those in terms of how they've taken corporate brands and still applied, you know, perhaps more brickwork to bring sort of the texture of the county's architectural fabric to those projects, incorporating possibly stone or simulated stone panels that bring in more texture and a connection to some of the natural materials that are prevalent in the broader architecture of our county. So I think, you know, from my own personal perspective, would encourage and appreciate maybe looking at ways to reduce the amount of overall metal panel and ways to bring in maybe elements that reflect more the texture and natural materials in the county. Not that there shouldn't be any metal panel. Clearly, that's a prominent feature in many car dealerships. And then I think even at a really subtle tectonic level, looking at how that metal panel is articulated in some buildings, you know, it looks almost like a stacked panel of some structural element. I think in the current articulation, there's sort of openings cut into what feels like an overall wrapper. I mean, certainly both approaches are valid, but I think as you look at developing the metal panel language, there are lots of good precedents in your work and others for how to handle that material. Well, I guess we've made it around the horn, but that could just be the beginning of the discussion. Happy to keep it going if you'd like, Bob.
No, this has been very helpful. This sounds a little canned, but our objective is to make beautiful buildings that are scaled and appropriate, and we're not trying to buck the system. We do that in regards to branding. There are specific things that we're being asked to present that are part of a national, a national identity, let's say. In the case of Aldi, for example, I was amazed by, that was kind of off the shelf. We did modify it a little bit, but good design is good design. Sometimes national brands don't have good design. In this particular case, we thought that there was a lot that was right out of the box, good design. It happens to be branded, but that doesn't mean that there isn't good architecture ideology behind it, breakdown of mass and all those kind of things. So this was really our coming out dance to see what you felt and how we could move, what's the rules of engagement, let's say, and what are we trying to achieve. So I think you've given us a lot to digest and understand and react to. It was the idea of compatibility to something else which is changing, and how you do that over time. Do you do one thing and you say, well, this is compatible to this other thing, but that thing's changing, but we'll do that first and we'll kind of muddle our way through it, and then we'll go back to the first. It was a mental somersault that we couldn't solve, in our opinion, very well, given the design problem. So it seemed like that issue was more of a hindrance than actually creating better results. So I think you've given us a lot of clarity on that. If you wanted to, now that we have that kind of context a little bit better, is there any discussions relative to the more specific issues that staff has brought up in regards to like the mass on the corner there, where this is part of Subaru's customer experience? There's a place where you go pick up your car and they give you the keys, and it's a ceremonial aspect of it. That's what that covered porch is like, why it's that way. One of the issues that we want to show you in our book, that element is highlighted, but that's not from the entrance corridor. It's from the, almost an elevated view from the side, from the driveway area. We do have so I wanted to talk generally about that. You've already talked to us about the panels, so we'll work on that, materiality. The landscaping, we'll firm that up, but basically we're trying to leave it as is. And when we affect it, we put it back in kind, or as close as we can. So I wouldn't mind, just to get everybody's opinion about some of the more specific elements of the Subaru design.
Bob, I do have one question about finishes.
Yeah.
Exterior finishes. On your coded drawing there, item 3 is an exterior ephes trim. When I look at the rendering, the color seems very different than the color that's shown below. Is that?
Are you on page 17, Frank?
That's a great question. I am on page 28.
28. Oh, I see. Yes. So this, believe it or not, was part of this idea of trying to keep things consistent with the rest of it. So we painted the brick. There's an ephes band there already, I believe. So we were trying to look at everything. I think the least successful part maybe is the part right on that, the 3 and 1. So that was our try being compatible. Like, yeah, we still have the brick, but it doesn't look good to have, red brick in that particular area. It seemed like an anomaly based on what Subaru's aesthetic was. So there's part of that, which is the ethos band. It's kind of a mauve, you know, the different color didn't meet the tone of what Subaru was trying to do. So I hope I answered your question. It was,
So, yeah, no, my question is the ethos band,
yep,
item 3,
yep,
which appears to be pretty close in color to item 2, which is
Yes.
the aluminum composite panel, right?
yes,
When you look at page 29 and you look at item 3, the exterior trim ethos, it's substantially darker.
oh, I see. Okay,
So just trying to figure out, is it going to look more like the rendering, or is in fact that stripe going to be dark gray?
it's a good question, Frank. I have sometimes, depending on the light quality and where we shine it, our renderings tend to maybe bleed out particular materials. We'll be much more definitive about that, so I can't answer that. Whether it's, I think the intention is that those two things look much more similar, because to bring
Yeah.
a darker band there would be highlighting something that isn't really that much of a design element. It would distract it from, you know, the left-hand version of, you know,
Right.
the entrance. So
Okay.
I think to answer your question directly, 3 would be more like the panel.
More like 2.
More like 2.
Yeah. Okay.
And, you know, just programmatically, that whole wing is a service bay. You know, so it's disassociated, you know, it's raised up on a plinth. There's not much activity happening there or people approaching the building on that side.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Any particular comments? And we have, Margaret, can I share the screen?
Sure.
So let's go with this one. So what we're trying to show here is what looked like a primary piece with this covering where you receive your car from the entrance corridor is less of a thing than it would be from, you know, looking at it as we wanted to include in our package just so everybody could understand what it looked like formally. But from the front facade, we feel that it plays quite nicely with, you know, a series of boxes, and we tried to break down the scale of that to a certain degree, while making it, part of the design problem is that it is an element that's in a primary location. But effectively, it doesn't show that much relative to, you know, either the entrance corridor or right as you make that entrance to Hilltop. Hilton, sorry. So I just wanted to understand if the board members had any particular concerns about that mass as it's rendered.
I don't.
I don't either.
Just have a-
support. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
one question. These new images are helpful. So it looks like, okay, I think you just answered my question by zooming in. So where the word Umansky is, the plane of that and the plane of the main building are the same. That's their coplanar.
Yes.
Or is there a step back? There's no step back there. Okay,
There's
gotcha.
no step back. We do drop the mass relative. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a subtlety. I mean, if that were stepped back, the depth of that column, that might be, I guess I'll use the word appropriate, but more traditional. But I think the overall scale.
Yeah, we can look into that because we have some site issues here, but nothing we can't resolve, I don't think.
Even if it's, you know, just a slight step back, I'm just looking at it in comparison to the rest of the mass of the building.
Yeah.
As it goes across, wherever the roof line breaks, it looks like there's little bit of a step back.
Yeah, we could even something as subtle as that.
Yeah.
You know, yeah,
Yeah.
great suggestion. Okay. Margaret, is there anything more specific that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think it would be good if we can get some clarity on an aspect of the compatibility issue. The condition of the special use permit requires that there be compatibility, and if I've heard sort of two different takes on this. One, that maybe the compatibility really isn't necessary, and if that's what the board thinks, then that would be good to know, because the applicant could ask to amend the special use permit to remove that condition, and that could clean up things for the future, any other compatibility issues between 2 and 1 or phase 1 and phase 2. If the board thinks compatibility is still required, and it sounds like everyone thinks there is still a level of compatibility with what's being proposed, it would be helpful just to list the items or the characteristics that achieve that compatibility, so we can have that for the record.
Thank you, Margaret. Great questions and options. Guess we'll just go around the horn again. Fred, you want to take pole position?
Sure. I actually just for kicks looked up the official definition of compatibility, and it's a state in which two things are able to exist or occur together without problems or conflict. So, that's a pretty broad definition. And in my mind, that really, as I said, I think earlier, doesn't necessarily have to mean they're the same materials. I think it's when you see the two, are the scales compatible? Are the forms, sort of correct in their proportions? Is there thoughtfulness in design detailing? I think all of those things help to contribute to compatibility. So if I were asked, if I felt like the new design that you're proposing in phase 1 were compatible, I would say yes for those reasons.
Thank you, Fred. And Frank Stone?
I would agree with what Fred's just said. I think it's compatibility doesn't have to mean that the materials are the same or even similar. It just means that the two buildings need to feel appropriate in their place. And I think given the high likelihood that phase 2, the Honda Chrysler dealership is going to change maybe soon, I don't think it should be a major consideration, and I don't think I'd have a hard time pointing to specific architectural items that make it compatible, I guess, unless I could see the two together. And as I look through the package, it's kind of hard. I can't say that I see them together in a way that makes it easy for me to tell you what those items are that would, in my mind, make them compatible. So sorry, that's kind of a cop-out, but.
Not at all. And I mean, to Margaret's point, she makes a good one about, is it really even necessary to leave it in the requirement for the site? I guess there's an extent to which, we're charged with creating or seeing the projects support, good order and cohesion in the county. And, that as an overall thing may cover enough that we don't need it in this. But Frank Hancock, what would you add?
I don't really have anything to add. I agree with what Fred laid out of, hey, there's a lot there's many ways to describe or demonstrate compatibility, and it's not, red brick. I don't know. If you look at the Honda building, it kind of reads like a strip mall. This building looks like a car dealership, which, there's that honesty, that's what it is.
Thank you. And Chris?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. I think by that definition of compatibility, it is compatible with what's there in terms of massing and scale, color. It's not, I can't point to anything that's incompatible. Obviously, we don't know what the changes to the phase 1 building are going to be. But right now, I don't see this as kind of anything that in what's being proposed that sticks out from the existing, other than it just kind of makes the phase 1 building look even more like it needs a update.
Yeah.
Super. So Margaret, I appreciate your thinking outside of the box. Certainly, I would support removing that requirement if the applicant or others thought it was helpful. I do think that compatibility can be something that we're looking to achieve just through our general approach to the guidelines. And I think, as Fred pointed out, it's a very broad definition. For my own personal take, I think this building could be more compatible with what is there in terms of color and material if it had some elements that were warmer in color palette, whether or not it has more brick. But certainly in terms of form and scale and massing, siding, I think it's very compatible.
Margaret, procedurally, can you give us so I can tell the client, is that a long process is that a formal, can you give the logistics of if it was recommended to take the language out and amend the SUP, is that a long drawn out thing, or what does that look like?
It would be the standard special use permit review process, but it would be less complicated because that one condition, it wouldn't need to be reviewed by all the members of the site review committee because it's only the ARB and zoning, I would guess, that would be that would need to comment on it. So it would be a few months.
Okay.
Margaret, I may be misunderstanding the stipulation, but is it fair to say that it's, as long as the ARB defines the building as compatible, it meets the requirement?
Yes, but I'm just sort of trying to think ahead, and if there is another phase 1, then not being compatible with phase 2, or do we have to? Well,
yeah.
As the buildings continue to change and be renovated in the future, just avoid that. If the ARB thinks the condition isn't necessary anymore, then let's just get rid of it and not have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess what I'm asking though is it shouldn't hold up the process for the applicant, right?
It's true. If you're thinking that this design is compatible, this could move forward, and then on another track separate, you could pursue getting rid of that. Yep.
That's the way I'd do it.
That would be ideal. I know our client would say that would be the ideal.
Yep.
The only other issue I just would like to be sure we're clear on is the degree, sort of the level of the trademark design. I'm a little concerned how I think it seems to staff that the level of the trademark is pretty high with this design, and I know that some of the aspects of this design may be similar to other dealerships that the ARB has approved renovations for, but I start to just want to
well, that's a good
how other trademark designs might come in and that aren't dealerships, because I can say, well, they're all trademarks. This was approved as a fairly heavy trademark. Why can't mine be approved? Thank
you, Margaret. Invite others to comment. I do think maybe the branded color at the, the coping of the building is maybe one step further than we've seen many other projects go. But let's see, invite other members. Frank Hancock, you want to go?
I agree, Dave. I mean, if you look at the existing building, it has about the same number of branded elements, but I agree. I think that strip across the top is what kind of really sets it off. So maybe there's something you could look at there. I don't know if we count logos and count names and how many times it says Subaru or Mansky or has the logo, but it's pretty well branded now. So.
Thank you, Frank. Frank Stoner.
Yeah, I'm just looking at these other dealerships that are in the package. And I don't know, I'm not sure I find this any more highly branded than the other images I'm looking at, other than maybe the blue coping, although I think if the blue coping was gray coping, that'd probably be all right too. I don't know. I just, I have a hard time getting too agitated about it. Certainly there's a lot of writing on the wall, and that's a signage issue, and maybe the scale is too big, or there are too many signs, or I don't know whether the sign package as presented here meets our requirements or not, and that's kind of a separate issue.
Yeah.
I think I'm really focused on the architecture.
Mm-hmm. Great. Chris?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of when I made my initial statement, that's kind of what I was struggling with. It to me looks highly branded. Now, I think Frank just made a good point. I mean, a lot of the other dealerships around are to equally so to the same extent. So personally, I like what I see in terms of the proposal, but at the same time, it does look like a lot of the other Subaru corporate examples that were given in the package. So I just have, and it's not really a problem, but I really am acknowledging what staff was pointing out in their report. I'm not sure what to do with that, but that, I don't think, I can't deny that it is very, in line with the branding.
Thank you, Chris. Fred?
So here's how my train of thought went. I was looking at, again, these really useful images, and I was looking at page 8, and it shows Flow Mazda, Flow Audi, etc. From what I can tell of those images, the Umansky Toyota has a similar red stripe matching the Toyota logo, but it's not across the top of the building, it's actually below the building. And then I think that the signage is, from what I can tell, again, it's very small, but it appears that oh, thanks. Now I see you sharing your screen. It appears that the Umansky word, the signage is actually a different color. It's not the red, to try to tone down a little bit of the branding, perhaps. So then, and just kind of moving forward, none of the other buildings seem to have the stripes. Then I went to page 9, the existing conditions. And was interested in seeing, it looks like the existing building has a similar treatment across the top. Is that a blue stripe that goes around the building now? And if so, is that, it is. And so I wondered if what we're seeing in the rendering is actually a much bluer blue, like a much lighter blue, more like, you know, like, I don't know, like Margaret's blouse or Chris's shirt. That's different than what is actually going to show up. And if it's a much richer, darker blue, then that would really be there. I don't know. And then the last thing I'll say, if any of this is helpful at all, is on page 13 of the proposal that I think Frank Stoner referred to. You were looking at those images. I was intrigued by the upper right image where the Subaru logo is blue. There's a thin line of blue that surrounds the top of the cornice, but the rest of the letters and the wording are a much sort of more subdued, looks like gray or silver, that help to sort of bring the brand down just a little bit. And I wonder if that's a way we could head. Just a thought.
That's a great idea.
Thought that was a good
Yeah,
image.
thank you, Fred, for pointing to all those good observations in the materials. Yeah, I agree. It seems like the key issue that makes the branding footprint kind of expand is when the text and the logo and the coping all match. It feels like it sort of takes over the whole building. But to the extent the coping can be different than the branding, or the branding different than the coping, that would, for me, start to break that down better. And then I think also to my earlier comments about material and expression, I think to the extent the building can be less than totally metal panel and have some more diversity of material and texture, I think that will help break it down a bit and take it further from the trademark.
Well, thank you so much. I don't think we could have asked for more clarity from you, and just really appreciate this work session and being able to kind of talk through some of these issues. So really, really thankful for all your time.
Well, thank you, Bob, and thank you for a good presentation. Thank you, members, for a good discussion.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you.
Sure. Dave, it would be good to, if we could all look at the list of comments that were in the report and update them to bring them in line with the conversation.
Great, that would be great.
Share my screen. Are you able to see the Word document?
Yes, yeah, I can see it now, Margaret.
So I think comment number 1 requires, it read, the proposed design for the phase 2 building is not compatible with the phase 1 building. Clearly, I think you all want that sentence removed. It goes on to say, revise the proposal to provide a design that maintains a connection to the historic architecture of the area and compatibility with the phase 1 building. Options include, but are not limited to, I've struck out reducing the size scale of the pickup structure, and I've taken out maintaining the red brick, left in reducing the amount of ACM panel, and using earth tone colors.
That works for me. I don't know if other members have suggested revisions to that.
This is a nuance, but Dave, what I think I heard you say was rather than earth tone, warmer,
Warm.
consider
Yeah.
warmer colors.
Yep, fair enough. Yeah, no, I think that's right, Fred. Thank you.
So back to sentence 2. It seems like we're not really asking them to provide a new design that maintains a connection to the historic architecture of the area and compatibility with phase 1 building. Wondering if we should strike that as well.
I guess Margaret may be trying just to ground it in the guideline and the enabling legislation, which makes sense.
Yeah, my thought there is I think that's right. I think it sort of does ground it. Frank, I don't know. I'm wondering if, you know, the connection to the historic architecture of the area could be, to me, that's different than compatibility with the phase one building. The historic architecture of the area is more about scale and, you know.
Yeah, no, I get that. I just don't, I didn't hear anybody
Yeah.
suggesting that they revise the architecture of the building. People seem comfortable with the scale, and
I got you. Yeah.
that's why I'm asking the question.
But it's
Yeah.
more at the level of material and detailed expression
Right, yeah.
Good point. Yeah, I
rather
got
than
you.
massing to separate it that way.
Should it just be consider reducing the amount of ACM panel and the use of warmer colors, or
I think
versus
that's
a
fine.
revise to do this?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. You could almost strike everything and just have consider reducing the amount of ACM panel and increase warmer colors, something like that.
And would folks support including any language about elements with more texture and scale?
Yeah, I would. I think to your point, Dave, you know, maybe considering a different color for the coping at the top,
Yeah.
or Fred's idea, maybe, you know, the logo or the names end up being neutral in color, just to reduce the branded.
I think that's number 10 on here. I wonder if it's okay to,
Is it? Okay. Oh, yeah.
might be good to keep that called out as sort of a separate comment, just to help highlight it.
Yeah, good point.
And then actually, I guess one issue I forgot to ask about, and maybe this is a question for Frank Hancock. I may be misremembering the landscape at this site, but in my mind's eye, I think that a lot of the plantings have been sort of topiaried and sculpted. Is that the case here, or am I thinking of another nearby site?
I'm not sure. I believe staff's comment was just to, you know, bring it back to the approved landscape plan.
Okay.
Is that right, Margaret? That there were some age and.
Okay, thank you. So it's addressed through that. That sounds good. Do any members have any other suggested revisions? Great. Well, Margaret, thank you.
Okay, sorry, just one more thing.
Oh, yeah.
So that list of comments this was a preliminary review, so just a list of comments for the next submittal. But just for the record, I think it would be good to have a motion regarding the compatibility issue. The motion here would be to make a finding that the proposed architectural design for the Subaru building renovation is compatible with the design of the phase one building.
Sure. Yeah. Is there a member willing to make the motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
I'll second.
Carolyn, when you call the vote?
Yes. Mr. Stoner,
Aye.
Mr. Hancock,
Aye.
Mr. Henningsen,
Aye.
Mr. Vanderwerf,
Aye.
Mr. Missile.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
Thank you, Bob and Evan.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, before we move on, I'm so sorry I forgot to mention this at the top of the meeting, but I have to leave the meeting now. I have to get to a site visit. I apologize.
Quite all right. Safe travels, Frank.
Thank you. And I look forward to watching the recording because it is definitely being recorded. So I'll be up to speed at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Yep. All right, we don't have any work sessions, well, other than the one we just completed on the agenda. So in other business, there's one other business item, a discussion on the draft outline for one-pagers for the entrance corridor guidelines. Let's see, Margaret, will you share your presentation?
Sure. I'm going to just share my screen. I don't have a formal presentation. I hope by this point that everyone's had a chance to look at that outline. This would be just an outline of the information that we'd like to see included in these things that we're now calling one-pagers or the addendums to the guidelines for each of the corridors or for each segment of the corridors. Did everyone have an opportunity to take a look at the outline? So I would just say, or does anyone have suggestions on additions or revisions or things that should be excluded or just things we've completely forgotten? Or
I had a thought actually. In a way, every project that is approved by the ARB is a precedent, whether kind of good, bad, or ugly, or whether this current board would endorse that approval. I think it would be helpful just to have a list of every ARB approved project that is on that corridor. Just because we talk about kind of pre-EC projects versus projects that have been approved, I think even kind of beyond the notable examples that we would want to point to as something to be emulated, I think there would be some usefulness in just being able to identify, you know, these projects have been approved by the ARB, and anything else that you see there happened before the ARB existed.
Seems like a great suggestion, Chris, and
That
another
is great. Yeah.
good resource for applicants and the board.
could I ask, Chris, when you say a list, are you envisioning like a map that has pinpoints for each ARB approval with the name of the project, or or
Yeah, I guess I hadn't gotten that far. Maybe even just like a list of the addresses. And I don't even know if that's, I mean, I'm assuming that there are, you know, records, but I don't know if it would be easily like cross-referenced in a way that it would be an easy list to compile. But, you know, maybe listed by parcel number or by address.
Yeah, we could, I mean, it's easy to run a report that lists ARB applications that are in the system by parcel. And that, I'm wondering how helpful that will be to, if somebody looks through that list. I'm just wondering if that's the most useful way to present that information.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But we can think on that and see what, I'm just thinking if there's some graphic way to do it that might be, might make it easier to use.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah, I wonder if that gets woven into an applicant's, I'm so stepping back, I assume these one pagers will be available to an applicant who might have a request or, be thinking about applying for a building on the site, right, or on the corridor. So maybe once that application occurs and they have a location for that building, something that Chris is talking about in adjacencies, that might be able to say that, you're next to something that was never reviewed and approved by the ARB. So don't go looking there for precedent, right? Or you're in the middle of this planned community with signed guidelines out the wazoo that you need to be aware of, and it's been regulated by the ARB.
Yeah, good point.
I think on Margaret, on what is it? Number 2, BC, architectural characteristics, which says images of local historic buildings. I would also include exemplary new construction, if that was a question, for sure.
Okay. Mhm. Is everybody good with that?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah, yep.
Yes.
The only other thing thing I'm wondering about under character of corridor segment is whether it would be worth having some statement of the sort of general uses on the corridor. And I'm thinking back to the Avon Street extended conversation. Just because I think context is important, and if the historical use patterns on the corridor are consistent with the goals of the county, the current goals of the county, and those call for, primarily a warehouse district, then it'd be helpful to know that because we might apply different standards based on the predominant uses.
Okay, so an item under 2B would be historic use patterns.
Yeah, something like that. And I think, 250 you would say is largely agricultural in character, but
Okay. Is everybody good with that? Great.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah.
And Frank made me think of this. I wonder under predominant landscape characteristics, maybe this falls under patterns of organized site development and layout, but there's the natural landscape features, characteristic and vegetation, right? But then there's also the more structured built landscape features like street trees and those kinds of things. And I think it might be helpful to, if we're calling out natural landscape features, to also call out structured. That's not the right word, maybe.
I know what you mean.
Formalized landscape features.
Designed.
Yeah.
Margaret, a quick question about just a hypothetical that could easily come up in connection with, say, the Places 29, the new Places 29 plan, where we're now reviewing an application that happens to be on the 29 corridor, but in fact, its orientation is to another street, an internal street that the county's now prioritized as sort of the focus. How would we review that? And would that be an important consideration as well as we look at specific segments of corridors? And I'm thinking particularly 29, because it's going to be an issue. You're going to have buildings that no longer orient to 29, and how do we evaluate those?
Right, that's a really good point. And we definitely will need to take that into consideration when we get to 29. If it's a project that falls within the small area plan and it's form-based code, then that's got its whole own review, and so that issue would be taken care of with that form-based code review. But outside of that, yeah, it's something we're going to need to address. And so I don't have complete answers for you right now, but I think we'll definitely be having work sessions on that.
Great. Any other suggestions? No, Margaret, thank you
Looks
very
good.
much. Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay. Would you like me to bring up my other
Yeah,
document?
yeah, that would be great.
Let's see. Sharing again. Can you see that Word document? Make it a little bigger. Okay. So now that we have our outline, we'd like to figure out what our next steps are. I have a couple of questions here, maybe to help us figure out what those steps are. So I'm wondering what role each of the ARB members would like to continue to play in compiling that information that we've just settled on in the outlines. And are we going to sort of do a test run on one corridor before everybody jumps in on everything, or are we going to do multiple? Do we want to try to do multiple corridors at one time? And is everyone okay with compiling information before we have the design of the format finalized? As I mentioned a few weeks back, we do have a staff member coming on board to help with some of the graphics related to that. Hopefully we'll have that person up and running relatively soon. But would like to move forward with compiling the information as soon as possible. So.
Well, certainly, I think from my own perspective, it would be useful to compile it while the recent corridors that we've looked at are a little fresher in our minds. At least personally, speaking for myself, I'd be happy to help compile the information. I think in terms of the things that we talked about today, in terms of zoning and historic use and previously approved elements, that might be helpful to have a staff member's assistance with, but in terms of the other categories, would be happy to do that. Be very interested to hear what others have to say. I might propose that we start with 250 West because it consists of many segments, and see if we could maybe divide the segments and give that one a go as the first step, and then move on to the others. But happy to look at other proposals.
I was going to suggest, Margaret, you hire a good intern.
We don't have funding for an intern at the moment. But I'd love to have one.
Isn't there a class over in the architecture school, Fred, that could take this on as a project?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a class that could, but I mean, that's where all the good interns come from.
Yeah.
We had 2 turn us down this year. So it's more about finding them than having the work.
It's a very difficult market, yes.
Yeah.
For employers, that is.
Well, I agree with Dave. I think 250 is a good corridor to start with, since there are a lot of different sections, and it would allow us to kind of work through the format and on a fairly complicated corridor. Happy to help compile information. I think I don't know whether it would be more helpful for you, Margaret, over time for us to migrate to a single PowerPoint kind of format, that you guys could then easily take and drop into or make use of. But let us know, and I'm sure we could all start gravitating toward a single kind of format.
Okay.
And I also think it'd be helpful to get it done sooner rather than later, just because, yeah, my memory is not what it used to be.
Chris, anything you would add?
Yeah, I agree. I think tackling one is a good way to kind of iron out a lot of details rather than have us go in different directions and maybe doing things in different ways. It would be good to just tackle one and see how that goes and kind of use that as a model for the other corridors.
In a sense, it seems like I'll try to be. I'm sorry, Chris. Were you? I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. That was, I'm done.
I'll try to be more constructive than just offering someone else to hire an intern. I agree with the approach to sort of focusing in on this, and looking at the outline too. I think a lot of what we've done collectively over the last few months, I think, is already done. In other words, some of it, like identify significant historic sites, landmarks, buildings. We kind of did that, right? We kind of outlined key elements of orderly and attentive development and how they contribute to the overall coherence. So I think there are some things that we can fill in, and then maybe some other things like a map of each corridor and maybe a 2-sentence history, those kinds of things that the staff person you just mentioned, Margaret, might be able to sort of help build. And then we can take it and fill in sort of the bits and pieces that we observed.
Sounds good, Fred.
Yeah, and I think many of those graphics, to your point, are already done. I mean, Dade, when he did his, he had a map of those different segments of the core. A lot of that stuff you could just drag and drop right into this one pager, I would think, or into whatever it's going to be.
Okay.
Right. And so,
What are we thinking in terms of time frame?
Is that a question for me?
Well, or yeah, I guess, yeah, because you're the one most challenged, I think, with support.
I don't know if we could.
I don't know. Can you be more specific? Are you the time?
Well,
I mean, are
something-
we saying we want to get this done in the next month, in the next 2 months? What, like, how soon do you want to have it done?
Yesterday.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we could jump, I'm certainly prepared to jump on whatever. But I agree. I think sooner is the better. But
Yeah.
so if
I don't
we
know.
said-
I think doing one corridor or maybe even one segment of one corridor first, just to try to get it together and see how that works, would be helpful. Just to see what gaps there really are. Like I'm looking back at the outline, the images, photographs, actual photographs, current day photographs, rather than pulling images from, Street View, Google Street View. That can be a time-consuming thing. That could be something that would be helpful if you all are able to do some of that. And then just finding a way to get that additional information that will be coming in. To see what format we need it in, so we don't have to change it up. I think once we get one segment, get all the information for one segment, I think we'll have a better idea of how quickly we can move through it.
okay.
Yeah. But I would like to sort of get us on a schedule so that we are continuing to move through it and making progress.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to do that. I don't know, might propose, I know at least for me personally, I don't really have any extra time in June, but could probably propose that we aim, at least for myself, to compile things by the end of July. I don't know about new photography. I guess as an interim step, I might ask whether maybe we could identify those existing properties that aren't yet documented in Street View and maybe limiting any additional photography to elements that maybe aren't captured in what we've been able to get from those open sources. And although if anybody would like to begin with tackling one segment in June, would welcome and appreciate that as a way to suss out what to have.
Yeah, I may reverse my earlier statement. Would it make more sense to do a quarter that's easier, just because 250 has so many different segments?
Right.
Maybe
Like
pick
20
one.
south? I don't
Yeah,
know.
or I mean, 151 was probably the easiest, in that there was only about 2
There's
miles of
That's
1, 2
border.
right.
miles. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's a good point.
Yeah, we could start with that one. Frank, would you have time in June to?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, why don't we say that then? Why don't we start with 151? And I will let me look through what you put together, and I'll compare it to this outline here, and maybe just set up a quick phone call with you and see how to move forward.
Okay, that sounds great.
Great.
Perfect.
wonderful. Thank you, Frank.
Great. I think that works.
Great. And then for question 4 down there, Margaret, I might propose that we start surveying the other ECs maybe after we've gone through gathering the information on those we've looked at to date.
Okay. Great.
Super. Thank you, Margaret. Anything else before we? Great. Really appreciate your and everybody's contributions to this effort. So let's see, the last item today, I think, is approval of minutes for May 17th, 2021. I think Fred and I were both absent, so we'll be recused. So I guess Chris or Frank.
So I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you. Carolyn, will you call the vote?
Mr. Stoner,
Aye.
Mr. Hensington.
Aye.
Sorry. Mr. Vanderwerf,
Abstain.
Mr. Missile.
Abstain, but does that mean we don't have a majority?
I think we still have a quorum and we have, oh, but that's 2 to 2.
2 to 2, yeah.
The fact that you were you did not attend the meeting does not mean you cannot vote for the minutes.
All right. Well, then I will change my vote to aye.
And Mr. Missile?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Those were very good minutes. All right. All right, our next meeting is a virtual meeting on June 21, 2021. Is everybody planning to attend?
I unfortunately will be out of town.
Okay.
Nice. Or fortunately, I hope it's fortunate.
Yeah, I'm not working.
Okay.
It'll be fun, hopefully.
Okay, yeah, I believe I should be there.
Margaret, do you ever see us going back to a live meeting, or?
I was wondering that.
Good question.
Yeah, we don't have a specific date yet. I think that we will probably be continuing to meet virtually through the summer, but no final decisions made yet.
It actually worked pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very convenient.
Yeah.
It sounds like members would be open to continuing virtually if permitted by the county.
No, it's not just the county, it's the FOIA regulations.
Ah, right. Yeah.
So.
This is almost more foiable than.
Yeah.
It's a one-stop shopping.
That's right.
Yeah.
Really, from a staff perspective, this is much more efficient.
Yes. Yeah.
Doing the
I
meetings.
don't know that our viewership has been increasing though, but.
I think you just created a new word, Dave. Foiable. I like it.
Foiable, yes.
Foiable, yeah.
Yes. Great.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Well, thank you everybody for your time today. Being no further items, we will adjourn.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care, everyone.
Have a good 2 weeks.